What's up, everybody? I am your host, a demon from another dimension that had a workplace accident with a nail gun. And that is my co-demon, a dental patient that likes to show off his teeth and loves black leather and has a fondness for torture. And welcome to the Grindhouse Syndicate, where today we cover one of my favorite movies ever and a very iconic horror film, Clive Barker's Hellraiser from 1987. So, a few weeks back, I put out a social media post where I asked if anybody really wanted to hear us cover Hellraiser. I was very excited, and a bunch of you responded, and I was super stoked because I just picked up the new Arrow box set of the first 4 films. I personally only consider the first 4 actual Hellraiser films, but that is a whole nother story. But yeah, so that gave me the time to crack this thing open and watch the new 4K remaster and dive into all of the special features. I'm stoked we're doing this.
I am chattering my teeth over here with excitement.
Yeah. Now, this thing's loaded with special features, so I've only been able to check out the first film. So going through this box set is a bit of a work in progress. But if you are a Hellraiser fan, I highly recommend you pick this version up. It has so much cool stuff. I mean, somebody actually went back in their attic and pulled like all the the original digital press kit for like small TV stations and stuff. You can watch all that stuff. You can watch like the original trailer. They got interviews and people just talking about the movie, and it's awesome. It looks great. And, doing the show, I don't have a lot of time to always watch movies that I want to watch, especially like tons of special features. So thank you guys for allowing me to actually open my box set up and watch a bunch of shit. And it was for the show.
We do pick the movies, right?
We do pick them, but it's not always a movie. Like, I don't like order a box set and immediately be like, we're doing this movie.
Yeah.
We typically kind of discuss it a little bit and we make our picks or whatever, but I would have eventually picked it, but the fact that everyone wanted to hear it, I was like, okay, we're putting this on the schedule now.
Yeah, so the box set's really fucking cool. And this week I discovered on Arrow that there's an alternative box set.
Oh,
cover,
yeah.
And it is Chatter. And which was my favorite out of all the cenobites.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I've decided that I'm getting that version.
You're going to go with that version.
So when we do a video going over the physical media box set, we'll have them both.
Yeah, so the box set's cool because it has the picture of, whatever Cenobite you get, and it has these little kind of holes cut out of the Cenobite's head where you can kind of see his like blood and stuff underneath. And you pull the actual DVDs out of the box set, and then you get kind of the version of the Cenobite with no skin. And then you remove another layer of the box set, and it actually goes even further, so it's like takes away the blood, and then it's just like the muscle and bone of the Cenobite. It's fucking amazing, man. It's amazing. Definitely pick it up. Now, this movie's special effects and costume design, this shit fucked me up when I was a kid. Like, it gave me nightmares, and now that I'm older, I love it. It's a fantastic film. And a funny story, when I was stationed in Alaska, I actually got Hanson and his wife, we've talked about him many times, I got them to watch this with me. I believe it was their first time ever seeing it. And we now, still to this day, quote lines from this movie at each other all the time. I believe after we watched it, that first like week or two, we just would yell Julia throughout the house. So we all lived together. Yeah, it's still, like, I was shooting him Hellraiser quotes the other day.
Yeah, this is a franchise as a whole that I have not dove as deep into, but I do. I've seen the first, and what stands out the most to me is Frank in this movie. That's what terrified me as a kid.
Yeah, he is scary.
Yeah, whenever he first comes back in this movie, and they're just showing him in the dark with a little bit of light hitting him, and then the light hits his face for the first time. That shit's legitimately fucking scary.
Yeah, and I will say with Hellraiser 2, it has one of the best sequels I've ever seen. Hellbound is it's a perfect sequel. Like to go along with the first one, it literally picks up somewhat right after the first one, has some of the same people in it, and you actually go into hell. You actually go to where the Cenobites rule. So the first movie, you get, the Cenobites here on Earth, and then the second movie, you actually get to go to this place that they're talking about in the first one. It's great, man. And you get another awesome villain in that one too. So fantastic. And then Hellraiser 3 is so fucking fun and awesome. It's basically Pinhead is released from this dimension, from his job as like the Cenobite, and he's just out for himself, and he's just causing fucking chaos all over the world. Well, I almost said all over the world, but here in the world, there's a scene, dude, where he literally fucking walks down the street and kills like fucking 60 cops. It's amazing.
I wonder if he got a good severance package from hell.
Man, the first three are awesome. I really only consider the first 4 Hellraiser films because those movies were written as Hellraiser films, and then everything else after that was not written as a Hellraiser film. It was a cop drama that the Cenobites were crammed into there at the very end. It's dumb. I own them all. I've watched them all, and I'll tell you, just watch the first 4 and just leave it at that.
Yeah, I've seen parts of some of the later ones, and not so good.
Yeah. Maybe I'll do like a short episode or something one time of kind of explaining what happened to the Hellraiser franchise, but we'll keep it short and sweet here. Also, the response to the horror news on Patreon was great. You guys liked it, so we're going to keep that going. We just finished the second episode, so be on the lookout for that. And with that being said, are you ready to jump into Hellraiser?
I am ready. My voice is not.
All right, let's do it.
Hello, boys and ghouls. If you want to stay up to date on what's going on with the show, talk about or submit your movie requests, or just say die, then I got good news for you. You can always find us at one of our social media accounts or our official website at Grindhouse.Horror.Pod.com, Facecrook at the Grindhouse Syndicate Horror Podcast, Instascam at grindhousesyndicate.horror.pod, and many gore, which you can always find links for in the show notes as always. And you know what I always say, the morgue, the merrier. So please subscribe or follow for alerts on new episodes. Now, back to the show, kiddies. Frights, camera, action.
And if you really love us and don't want us to play with a mysterious puzzle box that summons angels to some and demons to others, give us a review. Hellraiser is a 1987 British supernatural horror film written and directed by Clive Barker in his directorial debut and is based on Barker's 1986 novella, The Hellbound Heart. The film's plot centers around a mystical puzzle box that summons the Cenobites, a group of extra-dimensional sadomasochistic beings who cannot tell the difference between pain and pleasure. It stars Andrew Robinson, Claire Higgins, a fresh-faced 20-year-old Ashley Lawrence, and Doug Bradley as the leader of the Cenobites. It was produced by Christopher Figg and New World Pictures, and it had a budget of $1 million and a box office of $30 million. So the reason that the budget was so small was because Barker actually asked Christopher Figg how small the budget would have to be for him to direct it, because he had never directed anything before. And he responded, well, it would have to be $1 million or under for someone to basically let someone who's never directed a movie before direct one. So that is why the budget is only $1 million. Development of the film began before Barker's novella was published, and this is because he actually wrote the novella to turn into a movie. But he was disappointed by previous adaptations of his work, so he elected to direct the movie himself, appropriating several actors and crew from his earlier career as a playwright. Hellraiser was filmed at the end of 1986 and was set to be made in 7 weeks, but was extended over a 9 to 10-week period by New World Pictures. The film was originally made under the working title of I'm not going to be able to say that. Yeah.
Masochistic.
Yeah, I have it in my head.
Masochistic.
I just can't say it. From Beyond the Grave, which is not a good title.
I have it in my head. My voice just can't say
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, so Barker also wanted to call the film Hellbound, but producer Christopher Figg suggested Hellraiser instead, which would make sense because the sequel is named that.
Yeah, he got so much success. He's like, I'm naming this next movie what I want to name it.
Yeah, so the special effects of the unnamed creature known as the Engineer in the novels proved challenging as the creature was difficult to maneuver. Other issues included a rushed shoot of the Chinese restaurant scene with Christy and Larry due to the lateness of the person responsible for letting the cast and crew into the establishment. Numerous props of the puzzle box was constructed from wood and cut out of brass and were made by special effects designer and maker Simon Sayas. Due to the box's delicate construction, Sayas would lie on the floor under the cenobites during filming in case it was dropped in order to save himself 8 hours that it takes to make one puzzle box. Bob Keane designed these special makeup effects for the film. While only in his mid-20s, Keane had amassed an impressive list of credits that included the likes of the original Star Wars trilogy, multiple Jim Henson films, and Life Force, which is a movie Jordan here almost picked just like 2 weeks ago, and a handful of projects under his mentor, Nick Malley. It was through Malley that Keane was tasked with designing the makeup effects for Highlander, which is what put him on the radar for Hellraiser producer Christopher Figg. Hellraiser would be the first feature film of the upstart special effects studio Image Animation, which Keane co-founded with Hellraiser's workshop supervisor, Goff Portis. About 7 or 8 weeks after principal photography had finished, the executive producers saw the footage and they liked the film enough to invest some more in it. So a few scenes were redone with a higher budget, like the scene near the end where Frank's body is ripped apart. To produce Frank's resurrection, effects like reverse motion were used to give his skeleton flesh and inner organs. Clive Barker had to make some cuts on the film after the MPAA originally gave it an X rating. 2.5 shots were removed from the first hammer murder, including a close-up of the hammer lodged in the victim's head. In the scene where Julia murders another man, the actor playing the victim felt that it made sense for him to play this scene naked, so that had to be cut.
That's strange.
My guess would be it was the second guy that she kills because he like has that really stupid look on his face and he very exaggerate like he falls down. He just looks ridiculous. If you watch the movie, you'll know who I'm talking about. I think it was him.
He insisted on being naked.
He wanted to be naked. Well, at least one of them wanted to be naked. And I think it would be him.
He's like, somebody here is going to see this dick.
Somebody's
going to see it.
I shaved my pubes for this scene, and I'm showing them off. Close-ups of Christy sticking her hand into Frank's stomach, exposing his guts. That was also cut. A longer version of the scene where Frank is being torn into pieces, and the final shot where his head explodes, all that stuff was cut. Hellraiser had its first public showing at the Prince Charles Cinema on September 10th of 1987. The film was released in the United States and Canada on September 18th of the same year. In North America, Hellraiser has been released by Anchor Bay Entertainment 3 times, all of which are the original 93-minute version of the film. It was packaged alongside with Hellbound Hellraiser 2 in a limited edition 10 case, which included a 48-page color booklet and a reproduction theatrical poster of both of the films. In October of 2015, Arrow Films released the film on Blu-ray in the UK, along with Hellbound Hellraiser 2 and Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth in a Scarlet Box edition featuring a new 2K restoration and extensive list of bonus features, including a feature-length documentaries. Also, Arrow just came out with their even newer version, which they did last year, which they worked on, did all the interviews and stuff last year, just came out this year. Hellraiser was followed by 9 sequels, the first 7 of which featured Doug Bradley reprising his role as Pinhead. Clive Barker has stated that he signed away the story and character rights to the production company prior to the release of the first film, not realizing the critical and financial success it would be. So, unfortunately, before this one even came out, he had already signed the rights away to New World Pictures.
That sucks.
Yeah.
Especially knowing that he didn't make. I mean, he took the lowest budget possible to make this movie.
Yeah, that's a bummer. In 2018, after the critical and commercial success of Halloween, Miramax Films had confirmed plans for a new Hellraiser. The film was greenlit in early 2019 with David Bruckner directing, and it was released on Hulu on October of 2022. A Hellraiser television series is currently in development at HBO. So we'll see how that turns out.
Oh God. That could be bad.
Well, they're actually HBO's doing a lot of horror stuff. They did The Last of Us, which came out pretty good.
That was good.
But
that was based off a game.
It's a horror game though. And then they're doing the Welcome to Derry. That's coming out, so we don't know if that's good or
could
not.
be bad.
That could be bad, but it looks, from what I can tell, it looks okay. All right, so ratings. Rotten Tom, 69%. So that's not bad.
No, I'm surprised that they didn't give this a higher rating.
Because independent?
Well, it's got some very beautiful shots in it.
It does. It is a really good movie for somebody who was directing their first movie. There are some things here and there, and we'll talk about it as we go through the plot. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I would rate it higher than that. But it's Rotten Tomatoes.
Like some of the shot setups that when the blood is dripping, and they do that slow down close up of the blood hitting the wood.
Yeah.
And man, it's just shots like that. Really, really artsy movie.
It was supposed to be
as gory as it is.
It was supposed to be an art movie. Actually, Clive Barker's talked about that many times. It's really just an art movie. So IMDb gave it a 6.9 out of 10. Letterboxd. Oh, I forgot to get the Letterboxd one. Oh well, fuck them. And the Google average audience rating is a 3.8 out of 5. Google audience, you don't know what you're talking about. If you would like to watch this movie, you can currently find it streaming for free on Tubi, Pluto TV, and Filio. And you can rent it on Amazon, Roku, Redbox, Google Play, Apple TV, and YouTube for like $3.99. All right, are you ready to dive into the plot of Hellraiser?
I am.
Let's do it. So we start off with a close-up of a puzzle box made from wood and brass, just sitting on a table in a busy marketplace in an unknown foreign country. We then hear a man say, "What's your pleasure, Mr. Cotton?" as we begin to zoom out from the table. We then hear an American man say, "The box," as he slams down a stack of money. And this is one of our main characters, Frank Cotton. And he should be put in jail immediately for those nasty ass fingernails. That's fucking gross.
Yeah, this dude's never washed his hands.
He looked like he dug through a pile of Virginia coal. Like, it's just, his nails are just black and fucking gross. And
it's bad.
Yeah. So this gross bastard buys this box, and we then see him take it to his dark-ass attic room back in the U.S., where he has surrounded himself by lit candles, removed half his clothes, and begun trying to solve the puzzle. A few seconds later, the puzzle box begins to move around on its own, and we start to hear wood creaking and lights shining into the room. Frank begins to start nervously looking around, and it becomes obvious that he is expecting something to happen here. And that something takes form as a bolt of electricity shoots from the box and sends small hooks stabbing through Frank's skin. Frank immediately screams in pain as the hooks stretch his skin, and the scene quickly changes to a shot of the 2-story home here in America, which, if you didn't know, this movie was actually filmed in the UK, and it was supposed to take place in the UK, And New World Pictures actually thought it would be better to change it to America. This is why some of the actors, mainly Frank, you can tell his voice is dubbed because he's actually an English actor and they changed it to American. So we quickly see that this house is just like Frank's nails, absolutely disgusting. And the reason for that is because this is where Frank lives. And
Frank is a nasty bastard.
he's nasty. And the home actually belonged to Frank's parents. And when they passed away, it was left to Frank and his brother Larry. I assume Larry already had his house in Brooklyn, so right now only Frank lives here. Then we jump to a shot of a very dark room where we see chains hanging from the ceiling connected to bloody flesh, along with these columns that have chains and spikes and hooks attached to them, which are also holding like body parts and human flesh. And then we get our first introduction to the cenobites. We see a pale, bald woman dressed in all black leather suit with metal wires coming out of her mouth. We then see a man who is also pale and bald wearing a leather suit, but he has metal pins protruding from his whole entire skull. And this guy will eventually be known as the Hell Priest himself, Pinhead. So we see these two walk into this room, and the floor is just like covered in blood and skin and chains. Pinhead looks down towards the floor and he picks up a large piece of Frank's face, which had been completely ripped apart by these chains and hooks. After realizing that Frank is gone, he picks up the puzzle box and he returns it to its normal configuration. And as soon as he does this, we see the blue lightning again, and suddenly the room in the attic just turns back to normal. So what's happening here is you change the configuration of the box, and it basically acts like a key that opens a door to a hell dimension where you get pretty much tortured. Once the box is turned back, the door is closed and everything goes back to normal, and whatever is left of you gets transported to the other dimension. So right after this, we then see Frank's brother and his wife, Julia, arrive at the home. And apparently, Frank has been missing for quite some time, and his brother has just moved back to town, and he's taken over the house. His wife, Julia, looks around at all the clutter and the filth and disgust, and Larry attempts to talk her into moving into this house. Larry then hears the phone ring and goes to answer it in another room, while Julia then begins going through Frank's things. When Larry picks up the phone, he's delighted to hear the voice of his daughter, Christy, who is played by the beautiful Ashley Lawrence, who I had like the biggest crush on since I was, I don't know, like fucking 8 or 9 years old.
She is beautiful.
She is good looking. And Christy here is going to play the part of our final girl in this story. I love the part where she tells him like she's in town and she found a room to stay in, and he's trying to convince her to stay at the house with them. And he's like, well, you would love this house. And she pauses for a minute and she says, well, you would love my room. and this is all because her and her bitch-faced stepmom, Julia, do not really get along.
And she probably wouldn't love the house. The house is pretty bad.
Well, in its current state, it's pretty bad. Yeah.
I think her room's better.
Yeah. So while Larry's on the phone with Christy, we then see Julia looking through a bunch of Frank's pictures where we see him doing some partying and kinky sex with random women. And this really gets Julia going. And you're about to find out why. So Larry gets off the phone and Julia hears this, so she quickly puts the photos like back in their little box, but she keeps one and she hides it in her jacket pocket. We then fast forward to moving day, where we see Julia unpacking boxes while Larry and two guys he hired move in furniture. And while this is going on, we see Christy arrive, and after saying hi to her dad, she heads into the kitchen. Meanwhile, upstairs, Julia has a moment alone, so she pulls out the picture of Frank and begins to stare at it passionately. And then we see a flashback scene of when Julia first met Frank as he arrives in town for their fucking wedding. And Julia is instantly in love, and Frank is totally willing to fuck her.
Yeah, Frank's a bastard.
Yeah, this is a bastard move.
Julia is a cunt.
Why would you Even, like, if you and your brother just didn't get along, didn't communicate, why would you come to his wedding?
To fuck his wife?
To fuck his wife. That's the only reason you'd come. So that's exactly what happens. Frank and Julia hook up right before her and Larry get married. And during this whole flashback scene, we keep like jumping back and forth between the past and the present. And we can see that this memory alone is making Julia moist, to say the least. Like,
Oh,
Julia's crotch has like that humid rainforest climate right now.
that's awful.
They literally fuck on her wedding dress. Like, the wedding dress is laying on the bed and they fuck on top of that.
She rubs his finger on her lips and spreads it and leave like a trail of dirt coming from under his fingernails.
Some oil from when he worked on his car. So while Julia's upstairs about to straight up have an orgasm from this memory of her and Frank, Larry is attempting to move a mattress up the stairs and he cuts his hand on a nail that is sticking out of the banister. As blood gushes from his wound, he starts to scream for his wife and he goes and looks for her. He finds her in the attic where we saw Frank ripped apart earlier in the movie and begs for her to help him. And as he's walking towards her holding his hand, we get a close-up of Larry's blood dripping all over the wood floor. And this is going to become important here soon.
This is an absolutely beautiful shot. Like the audio in this, where they slow it down and you hear it's like the echo of the blood drops, and very, very artsy shot.
Yeah.
Looks very good. Also, I gotta say, 3 dudes trying to get that bed up those steps, man. That must be the heaviest bed known to man.
Well, it was the 80s, so maybe they, I don't know, had really heavy mattresses back then.
You think it
Don't
was
know.
a fucking waterbed full.
Yeah. So after they walk out, we then see the floor soak up the blood until there is none left. And then we see that underneath the floor, mixed in with like a bunch of cobwebs, is a bloody piece of human tissue that starts beating like a heart. So the scene where the blood just pretty much soaks through the floor. So what they did was they drilled holes in the floor and then they pumped the blood up through the floor and then they just reversed the footage. And then that piece of like tissue that starts beating like a heart, that is just a condom.
I didn't pick up on the condom.
Just a condom.
The reverse footage is it's pretty obvious that it's reverse footage. I mean, if you've ever watched a movie and knew it was in reverse, didn't know that was a condom.
Yeah, so I did see an interview with some of the kind of people on set, and they would be sent out to buy supplies for the movie, and they kind of dreaded it because they would have to go and load up on condoms and lube because they use lube on Frank's body throughout this movie to make him look gross. So they were like P. Diddy just buying thousands of fucking bottles of lube, and then they were buying condoms to they would use it to like hold blood and stuff like that and make like really creepy looking like body parts and stuff. So
Bro, P. Diddy and Clive Barkers shot the stock of lube up.
So Julie and Christy, they rush Larry off to the hospital, and now that the house is empty, we start to see the floorboards popping loose, smoke rises from the cracks, and this gel-looking shit begins to leak out. After a few moments, we then suddenly see a skeletal, bloody version of Frank pop out of the floor. So Frank is kind of back in action, and the rest of him is finally as nasty as his fingernails.
I wouldn't say he's back in action. He's back.
He's better than being that just little condom piece under the floorboard.
Yeah. The fucking practical effects in this movie
I love this
are
scene.
incredible.
They are awesome. They're very gross, but they're amazing.
It's like it's make your skin crawl.
Yeah.
Like it's gnarly. I'm surprised that they got an R rating. I know they had to cut a lot of stuff. I'm surprised they didn't have to cut more.
Well, they were smart. They actually filmed more worse shit because they knew they did basically what Wes Craven had done.
Well, there's a lot of horror directors. Horror directors did that in the 80s and 90s. They would essentially, I think Rob Zombie did this too.
Yeah.
They film as much fucked up shit as you can. Like they would film stuff that they knew that wasn't even supposed to be in the movie.
Yeah.
just to use it as bait to
Yep.
cut.
This whole scene is one of my favorite special effects scenes of all special effects scenes. I love it. It's a 10 out of 10 for me. And also, originally, that little skeleton version that we see, that was the original version of Frank. Frank was supposed to be like that for a little while. It was basically a cheap plastic skeleton that they had made. And this is one of the scenes that New World Pictures actually had them go back and reshoot with more money. And that's the scene we get now. And it's really interesting how they did it. So what they did was they took that cheap plastic skeleton that was the original version of Frank, and they actually made all of his muscles and stuff out of wax, and they melted it. And then they filmed it melting, and then they used the reverse footage so it looks like his muscles are forming. They also took string and ran it through the wax, and then as the wax was melting, they actually pulled the string away. And then when you reverse the footage, it looks like his veins are growing. They're becoming veins. So super interesting, awesome way of how they filmed this.
It looks great.
Yeah.
I'm actually really glad that they reshot it and he wasn't just a cheap skeleton.
I did see, you can find a picture of the original skeleton, and it was creepy. Like, you see those two arms that come out of the floorboards, like that is the skeleton. But they didn't put all the muscle and stuff, that basically what they did with all the wax and the string. They didn't do that part of it. So it didn't look bad, but it was nowhere near this fucking cool.
Yeah, it's fucking, I'll agree, 10 out of 10. And this, like, Frank in the beginning of this movie, from here until he starts forming, is what absolutely stuck in my mind more than anything. He is fucking super creepy.
Yeah, so Frank Cotton was played by 3 different people. You have the Frank Cotton in the flashbacks. Then you have the Frank Cotton, which is like the bloody version that we're about to see for the majority of this movie. That guy was a really skinny guy, and he was able to fit into the prosthetic suit. And when he would get into that suit, it would look like a regular sized person because he was already so skinny, and you had the special effects suit over top of him. Yeah. And then you had the voice actor that they overdubbed. They overdubbed the original version of Frank. So you got 3 people that played the same character.
Well, this early version of him, this little, like shriveled up corpse,
Yeah,
is so fucking creepy.
it is creepy. So we then jump to later on that evening, where we can see that Larry and Julia are having a bit of a dinner party with 2 other couples, Christy and her boyfriend Steve. What was up with this stupid cigarette trick?
I don't
It
know.
was not impressive.
Yeah, I looked at Brooke and I'm like, apparently that's how you serenaded a woman in the 80s.
It's dumb.
If you could eat your cigarette and spit it back out,
Yeah.
that's how you got them.
Well, Julia's not having a good time here, and she decides to dip out early. So she excuses herself and heads back upstairs. She probably plans on flicking her bean to that Frank picture. But while up there, she starts to hear something going on in the attic from earlier, and she decides to investigate. And what does she find up there, you may ask? Well, a zombified version of Frank, who is kind of back from the dead. I don't know if he would officially be back. I don't know how all this works. He's back. He's back, but I don't know if he was
just barely back.
I don't know if he was like dead because he was in a different dimension, but he's back. So Julia fucking loses it. She freaks out, and as she attempts to open the door, Frank's creepy ass hand slams it shut and says, "Julia, don't look at me." Well, this catches her attention, and she asks who this person is, and he tells her it's him, Frank, and he needs her help. What if Frank was like, "I need your help. I took some fentanyl and all my skin fell off. I need you to get me some more." And she's like, "Some more skin?" He's like, "No, some more fentanyl."
I don't think the fent wasn't a thing yet. It's like, I need some of that H.
Yeah.
But
So
when he crawls at her in this tiny little shriveled up body, I would have lost it.
yeah, shit all over myself.
Yeah, I wouldn't have. She's not doing any love rubbing
No.
after this.
So while she attempts to catch her breath from the shock of seeing Frank turn into Billy Butcherson from Hocus Pocus, he tells her that Larry's blood that dripped on the floor is what brought him back and he needs her to bring him more blood. So after everyone goes home and goes to bed, we see that Larry is passed out while Julia lies in bed daydreaming about Frank rearranging them guts, and she decides that she's going to go back up to the attic real quick. She then opens the door and Frank looks over at her, where she then tells him with a smirk on her face that she's going to help. We then see Christy have a really fucked up weird dream. I'm not really sure what this dream means, but it was basically like this body laying on a table covered by a white sheet with tons of birds and feathers falling from the ceiling. And suddenly we hear a baby crying as the blood from the body begins to like stain the sheet. Christy then pulls the sheet off and I think it's a dead Larry. This is what it looks like to me. It's hard to really tell what that is.
Yeah, it had to be Larry.
I'm not
She says it was a dream about
I'm not
that.
sure what this dream was supposed to be, what it was supposed to represent. It was weird. It was cool.
It's a very artsy shot.
It
though.
is. It's cool, but I don't know what it's supposed to mean.
It's like a snow globe of death.
So the next day, when I guess Larry's at work, we see Julia get all dressed up like she's heading to a Rick Astley music video shoot. She's got on her black blazer with a yellow shirt, all black sunglasses, and her hair looks like it lost a battle with a hairdryer.
Bro, this hair and these fucking shoulder pads are the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how men found this shit attractive.
I don't either.
Ever.
It's very David Bowie.
She's like Balthazar Brat from the fucking Despicable Me with those shoulder pads.
Yeah. She heads to a fancy bar that looks like it's located in a hotel of some sort, and she sits there smoking a cigarette and drinking some water. The businessman sitting next to her sparks up a conversation and pretty much immediately starts hitting on her. And this is obviously what she wants because she plans on seducing some random guy and taking him home to feed him to her pet Frank. And that is exactly what she does with this guy. They both head to her house. She takes him upstairs with the promise of sex, but when they go into the attic room, he's like, "Where's the bed?" And she tells him that she prefers the floor, and he begins to take his clothes off. I guess that was good enough for him. The floor it is.
Bro, this guy's got some very rapey issues. He gets so fucking mad at her.
Oh, yeah. He's
when
like,
he's
"You better not
downstairs.
change your mind."
It's like, bitch, did you change your mind already?
I'm already hard. Once I'm hard, there's no going back.
And then they they go to fuck, and he's like, "Oh, I gotta go to the bathroom."
Yeah.
Like, what?
So once he gets down into his whitey tighties, he realizes that he has to pee. And when he goes to open the door, Julia grabs a hammer and starts hitting him in the head with it. He then falls to the floor, beaten and bloody as he pleads for his life. But Julia is dreaming of that Frank dick and nothing is gonna stand in her way.
I love how they show like the broken jaw. Like his jaw's like kind of crooked from the hammer. I do wish we'd have got that whole kill.
Yeah, there was that scene they actually cut out of it where like the hammer's literally lodged in his skull and shit. So she then delivers the death blow and backs away for Frank to do his thing. Frank then tells her not to look and she leaves the room while we see Frank crawl over to the body and grab it.
What do you think he does?
Well, we see what he does.
He's like lather himself up in it. He's like crawl inside of it and get as much blood as he can on him.
It's like a seal in like one of those the little baby pools. He's just splashing himself all over, having a ball. So after she washes up a bit in the bathroom, she heads back to the attic where she immediately sees the man's dead body. But now his face is disfigured and he's extremely shriveled up and covered in blood. He basically looks like he was sucked dry and not in the way he was hoping.
I don't know. Maybe that's why Frank doesn't want her in there.
Yeah.
I had to suck this man's soul out of his dick hole.
She then spots Frank in the corner, who is now standing by the window. And as he steps into the light, she sees that he now has thicker bones, human tissue, and muscles. So looking a lot better than he did 5 minutes ago.
Julia, it's not gay. It's not gay if you're dead.
He then tells her that every drop of blood she brings him puts flesh on his bones, and he knows that they both want that. He then demands for her to come over to him because he wants to touch her, which I'd be like, hell no, dude. You're not fucking touching me. You're fucking bloody and slimy.
You don't have skin.
You don't have no goddamn skin.
He's like, look, Julia, the dirt in my nails are coming back.
Well, she agrees with us because she doesn't go over to him. We then get our first iconic "Come to Daddy" in the movie.
He's like, let me touch you while my sackless nuts dangle on veins.
Yeah, I actually thought about that earlier. Frank then.
Oh, I get that.
Frank walks over. So Frank then walks over and he goes to touch her, and he immediately reaches for that titty. It's the first thing he goes to grab. But he quickly gets interrupted by Larry coming home from work. But Julia is able to hide the body, and Frank hides in the attic, and Larry's like none the wiser to all this shit. So later on, Julia heads back up to talk to Frank, and he tells her that his nerves are starting to feel again, and he thinks he just needs 1 or 2 more bodies before they can run off together. And this kind of confuses Julia for a moment when Frank then tells her that they have to go before the cenobites come looking for him. Before he gets the chance to explain this, though, they get briefly interrupted by Larry, who is yelling for Julia downstairs. She tells him that she's coming down in a minute and goes to finish her conversation with Frank, where he then tells her once she brings him some more bodies, they can be together like they did before. And the thought of this turns Julia on again as she then puts Frank's slimy, bloody, skinless finger in her mouth. It's so nasty.
That is the worst.
That is so nasty.
Oh.
We then cut to another kind of weird scene where we see Christy working her new job in a pet store. While attempting to deal with this difficult customer, she notices this homeless man come in and head straight to the back of the store. And she immediately notices him because she caught him watching her and her boyfriend the other night when they were walking home.
We got an 80s Karen alert.
Yeah.
When I seen that, I was talk to the manager.
Yeah, when I seen this scene, I was like, damn, they had Karens back then too. So she then leaves the front desk and she goes to confront this man. But when he turns around, he's got a fucking mouthful of crickets. This obviously disgusts Christy and she makes him leave. But before he makes it out the door, he mysteriously vanishes.
This is gross.
This is one
of those, like, just this movie does a really good job at having extremely uncomfortable scenes. This man has turned into a bearded dragon. His homelessness has driven him into bearded dragonism.
Eating crickets for protein. So the next day, we see Julia bring another man home for Frank. This is the guy I think that did the scene naked. So she once again promises sex up in the attic, and once they walk in, she kills him and Frank drains his blood. After this, Frank puts on pants and a white button-up shirt and smokes a cigarette, which he says he can finally taste, so he's kind of almost back. And even though he still doesn't have any skin, he does have tissue and ligaments and veins now, kind of covering up his bones more. He's got stuff like covering most of his organs. So he's getting better looking with each body he drains.
Bro, if I was a director and some fucking actor came in and was like, I gotta do this naked, I would be like, no.
Well, it's Clive Barker.
No.
Clive Barker would be like, I agree. So while he smokes this cigarette, Julia asks him basically what the hell happened to him. And he holds up the puzzle box and says, this is what happened. He then tells her that the box opens up doors to heaven and hell. And he then explains that basically he had done like every drug and every pleasurable experience he could find. And this was supposed to be like the ultimate high, where pleasure and pain were so intertwined, you couldn't tell which was which. So this is why he went in search of this box. Julia then sees a vision of the cenobites torturing Frank in the attic, and this greatly upsets her. So later that night, Larry and Julia are doing the sex in their bed when we see Frank is getting tired of sitting around in the attic waiting on Julia to bring him another body. So he makes his way down into their bedroom and hides in the closet watching them hook up. Just as things are getting hot and heavy, Julia spots Frank come out of the closet holding his switchblade, walking right for Larry. And Larry has his back turned, so he has no idea like Frank's even there. Julia, realizing what Frank is about to do, starts shouting, "No, no, please." Frank pulls a fucking dead rat out of his pocket and cuts it in half while Julia watches, which I don't know. I don't know why.
He's like, somebody did this once when I was having sex, and
It turned me
it
on.
was cool.
Yeah.
It was pretty rad. You think she cares about Larry,
Oh,
or you think she's like, Larry's got the money? I can't run off with you. You're broke
I don't
and dead.
don't think she loves Larry, but I think she's probably been with him a while to where she has no problem cheating on him or leaving him, but she doesn't really necessarily want him to die and then get sucked off.
I think it's the money. I think it's the support.
Oh, the support's probably a big part of it too, yeah. So as Julia continues pleading with Frank, Larry, who thinks that she's actually changed her mind about sex, he gets frustrated and he's like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" And that's pretty much the end of that. So the next day, we see Larry having lunch with Christy, and he tells her that he believes his marriage is in trouble. He says that Julia has been acting strange since they moved in the house, and she refuses to even leave, almost like she's waiting for something to happen. Christy tries to assure him that everything will be okay, but Larry doesn't believe that, and he asks for Christy to stop by the house when he isn't home and talk to Julia, and Christy agrees. I guess she feels bad, wants to help her dad out, even though she does not fucking like Julia.
I think Larry is very clear that he's in a fucked up marriage, even when they first come here, and I think that they have a very small spot early in the movie that shows that he misses his wife that died.
Oh, yeah.
Where he cuts his hand, one of the dinner guests says, "Does it still hurt?" And he goes, he like stares off, and he's like, "What?" for a second, and he says, "Oh yeah, but only when I drink." And I think that was in reference
Oh,
to
yeah, I didn't catch
his
that.
shitty marriage and his ex-wife, baby mama that had died.
Yeah, Julia's a rebound. I can see that.
And a bad one.
She's not a good one.
Like-
He probably just latched on to the first, woman that he came across because she's not attentive to him or anything. She doesn't like any of they don't seem like they have anything in common. So yeah, I mean, I could see that.
Yeah, I
could
think
totally
they
see
did
that.
a really slick way of putting that in there that he kind of earns, and for that connection that he used to have that he doesn't have with her.
Yeah, I did notice there was a scene too where when Christy first shows up when they're moving in and that fucking doofus guy like is hitting on Christy and he for some reason tells Larry like, "Yeah, your daughter has her mom's looks," and he instantly gets mad and he's like, "Her mom's dead."
Yeah.
So he's defensive over his daughter and his dead wife. So we then cut back to the house where Frank confronts Julia about not letting him kill Larry the night before, getting upset thinking that Julia just might actually love her husband, which must be a weird concept to Frank. It's like, how could you love him? Well, they're married, so that's, probably something to do with that.
Or it's 'cause he's got the money.
He's got the money. Julia says that she doesn't love him, but she still doesn't want Larry to die. And we now see that Frank is wearing a whole suit, and this suit is covered in blood because he still doesn't have any skin, but it looks awesome. It looks very creepy. You got this guy wearing this kind of regular suit. The undershirt is just blood red, like it's soaked in blood, and he still has no skin. So
Nothing
looks cool.
cooler than a guy smoking Camels in a suit with no fucking skin.
Yeah, that should have been their ad agency should have jumped on that.
No skin in the game.
While talking to Julia, Frank tells her that if she's not going to let him kill Larry, then she better go out and get him someone else because they need to hit the road before the cenobites showed up. And I just realized cenobites sounds like a cereal. Like, they missed a golden opportunity not coming out with, like, Hellraiser cereal. Get you some cenobites. They're like little
That's a good point.
little cinnamon pieces of body parts. And when you pour milk in, it turns the milk red.
Oh, man.
Cenobites,
See, we
man.
got something there.
Yeah, just hey, Mom, give me a box of Cenobites while you're out. So we then see Julia go out and pick up another man, but this time, as her and Frank's dinner are walking into the house, Christy spots them as she's walking into the yard. So when these two are walking upstairs, this guy stops and says, I get lonely sometimes. And I was like, you mean horny? You get horny sometimes. Because it's not like you're coming over here for a cup of coffee. You're coming to get that dick wet, bro.
Yeah, well, I thought that was interesting because that's something you would say to, like, a prostitute. Like, you're kind of ashamed and you're just like, I'm lonely. Why would you say that to some girl you met in a bar?
Yeah, I mean, and
Maybe she was out there on the streets.
maybe she was on the corner this time. We don't know. So they walk into the attic, and this guy immediately gets freaked out. And then he spots Frank's creepy ass lurking in the corner like a fucking fresh peeled scab. But before
This whole movie is a fresh peeled scab.
But before he can get away, Julia hits him in the head with the hammer. But this guy's got a skull of steel because it doesn't knock him out. He just lets out a loud yell, which Christy hears from the driveway.
This man is hard-headed.
Yeah. He then grabs Julia, attempting to use her as a human shield from an approaching Frank. And as Frank tries to pull Julia out of the man's hands, we see Christy break into the house. So I guess Christy planned on confronting a cheating Julia right then and there, like a episode of Cheaters.
Gonna beat that bitch's ass.
Yeah. So Frank pulls Julia away and grabs the man. He then yells for Julia to get out so he can do his thing. And we finally get to see how Frank is draining these bodies as we see him jam the tips of his fingers into the man's neck.
Jamming the tip of what?
I wonder why he's like so weird on nobody seeing how he drains these people's blood. Like, is it like when you're like
Well, this is just the first process.
It's like when you're like pee shy and like no matter how hard you try to pee, you can't pee with somebody watching you. It's like we've met people like that. That's like a real thing.
That is a real thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought, maybe it's Julia because he's like doesn't want Julia. He doesn't want to be embarrassed. But that would make sense early in the movie. But she's done sucked his fingers and shit.
She's seen literally like his literally like bones and muscles and shit. I think it's okay like for him to see the process.
And like his fucking sackless balls smacking between his knees.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Maybe this is just the first part of the process.
I'm thinking if he don't have no skin, he doesn't have any sack. So he's just got two little dangling balls there just hanging from one
Probably hang pretty far too. Like that's gross.
It's like one of those things that the psychiatrists have. It's like 6 silver balls and you like pull one to one side, you let it go and it clicks and it just clicks back and forth. So Christy
I had to put the suit on.
Yes, I gotta cover these balls up.
Julia, quit looking at my balls.
Imagine his dick. It's just like a bunch of bacon put together, just hanging there.
He's just like, yeah, I'm not gonna.
Oh yeah, actually,
comment on this episode so we don't get fucking screwed by YouTube.
Yeah, I did find out too that Clive Barker and 2 of the special effects guys actually went and watched videotapes of I
can only imagine what kind of videotapes they were watching.
It was a videotape of an autopsy where the technician literally skinned the body. Why he would do that, I don't know.
For science.
For science. And the special effects guy was like, we couldn't hardly look at it. Like, it was gross to us. But Clive Barker was disappointed because he said, it just looked like they put a bunch of bacon on somebody. Yeah, but they went and seen that so they could know what Frank it needs to look like.
Yeah.
But yeah, apparently Clive Barker didn't have a problem watching it, and he was disappointed in the real version of it.
I think that the holes in the neck is like when you're shotgunning a beer and you got to get an air funnel. He holds their neck and then and then sucks them out of other places.
Well, no, I mean, we see him. He does it later on to Julia, and we see he just sticks his fingers in their neck, and then they suck dry, and then he lets them go.
Maybe well, Julia doesn't have anywhere to suck her soul through.
Good point. So Christy finally makes her way to the top of the stairs, and it's all quiet at first, when suddenly the attic door opens and the man comes stumbling out, looking like a beat-up version of Emperor Palpatine. But right before Christy can help him, Frank walks out, revealing himself and finishing the job. Christy is immediately horrified at the sight of this skinless, bloody man in a suit, but Frank attempts to calm her down. Because he has no skin, she cannot tell that this is Uncle Frank. So he's like, "It's me, Uncle Frank, don't you remember me?" And she's like, no. And he grabs her and he slams her against a wall, and we get another, "Come to daddy," which, why would you say that to your niece?
Well, I think they heavily suggest this and later on in the movie that he obviously at some point probably molested her.
I've heard that talked about, where either he wanted to or maybe he did. You would think Larry would, when Frank is brought up, Larry, if that did happen, Larry would be like, "Yeah, fuck him," but he doesn't ever really say that.
Well, he kind of does though. Like he talks shit about in the beginning of the movie.
He's like a drug addict and stuff. But I lean
maybe
more.
that's something that he hasn't talked about with his wife. It might be something that you don't really want to talk about.
I mean, it's possible. I mean, I definitely see where people get that. My personal opinion is I think he probably wanted to or tried to.
Well,
but I don't know if he necessarily did it.
Well, if you're saying "come to daddy" to your niece, that's fucking weird. Like there's that.
Well, he says that to Julia too. Like he's
fucking Julia. He says it and he says it and like
he's working to fuck Julia. He don't got no skin yet. She's not.
Okay, well, he was trying to touch some titty.
He was trying to touch some titty. So he pushes Christy into the attic room where he tells her that she is grown and is so beautiful now. And she's like, "No, dude, stay the fuck away from me." So he backs her into a wall where he ends up grabbing her neck and leaning in real close, telling her about enduring the pain to make the pleasures so sweet or some shit like that.
That's also like a sign that he molested her.
I mean, I think he definitely wants to do it now, but I've never been on the train of that's fully what I think. I think it's possible, but I'm not going to say for sure. I don't know.
If I walked in on this, I think what would throw me the most is the suit. But why does this man with no suit have like if I was her when she first walked in, I think, why does this like the skinned alive man have a suit on?
I would be like, why doesn't he have any skin?
Well, yeah, that would be my first thought. But my second thought would be, my first thought would be, why is this skinned man?
Once you lose your skin, you might as well just not wear clothes. Like you're already open to everything.
Like who dresses nice but you don't have skin?
Frank. So this is where Christy gets smart because she realizes that he doesn't have any skin, so she just like reaches into his stomach and grabs a handful of guts. And this puts Frank's bitch ass straight to the floor, but unfortunately it only lasts a moment, and Frank grabs her again and she tries to make it to the door, but he's like wrestling around with her. She then knees him in his bloody balls.
She knees him in his knee and his balls.
Oh man, his balls just out in the cold like homeless testicles.
His balls swung around and smacked his back.
There's no sack to live in. So yeah, she knees him in the balls and she goes to grab a weapon, but the only thing that she can find close by is the puzzle box. So as soon as she picks it up, Frank's like, "No, give that back to me." And she's like, "Well, you can fucking have it," as she chucks it right out of the window and into the driveway. As Frank freaks out over the box, Christy makes her escape and even grabbing it on the way out, taking off down the street. So now Christy has possession of the puzzle box and Frank is still not fully healed and still needs more bodies if he plans on escaping the cenobites. So Christy pulls a Forrest Gump and just keeps running until eventually she just passes out, I guess. I'm not really sure what happens here. Later that night, she wakes up in a hospital, and this is the point in the movie where I was like, why are all the sets so gross? Like, even the hospital's
I
gross.
put in here, why are all 80s horror movie hospitals so dark and gross?
Yeah.
Like, every, 80s horror movie, the hospital's, super dark and dingy.
Yeah, like
Was this what hospitals used to be like?
I don't know. I was born in a hospital in the 80s. And I don't know. Was it shitty? I have no idea. So the doctor comes in and he tells her that she needs to rest and that some people found her passed out. She then claims that she doesn't really remember what happened, and then he pulls out the puzzle box from his pocket and asks her if this brings back any memories. She says it doesn't, but he informs her that the police want to talk to her, and he agrees to leave the box, hoping that it will jog her memory.
Bro, did they run this box as serial number and it came back stolen?
I don't know why the cops want to talk to her. As soon as he leaves the room, Christy tries to escape, but finds that they have locked the door. She then walks over and begins playing with the box, and when she starts touching it, we see purple electricity kind of swirl around it. It then begins to open and move around, much like we seen earlier in the movie, and this fascinates Christy. She then touches the center, which causes this big burst of electricity, and the box begins to transform into the other configuration, which causes one of the walls to slide out of the way, revealing a door to the hell dimension. She walks over to the door where she sees basically this dark, dingy, brick hallway that pretty much never ends. Christy starts hearing a baby screaming coming out of the hallway, and she decides that she's going to go check this out.
Why would you ever go through this door?
Don't know.
You got this from your skinless pedo uncle. Why would you ever, go through a door that this thing opened up?
Well, here's the thing that I think makes her go in, is she hears the baby crying, and it is the same baby crying that we hear in her dream. So I think that she's worried.
That would make me not want to go in.
Well, I think she's worried something's going to happen to her dad, especially now that she found out her skinless uncle's living in the attic.
Her dad's going to turn into a baby.
Maybe this box has an answer of how to save her dad. That's my guess.
Well, that's a pretty big stretch. I wouldn't go through the fucking wall. I would be like, I just seen a skinless man in a suit. I am not going through this fucking wall.
Well, she is braver than us.
This is how you lose your skin.
So, after a few minutes of walking, she comes across this grotesque creature called the Engineer. And I tried for a while, but I don't really know how to accurately describe this thing. It's kind of shaped like a giant tongue with arms and legs, but it has a demon face and a scorpion tail. You really got to see it. It's very difficult to describe. But as soon as she sees this thing, she takes off running back towards the hospital room, and the Engineer is looking for a snack, so he immediately starts chasing her. And as soon as she runs back through the doorway, she turns to look back, and the wall is normal again, but she can still hear this creature on the other side. So she grabs the box and she begins trying to put it back to normal, but unfortunately for Christy, this makes her problems so much worse. Because what she ends up doing here is calling 1-800-Cenobites, as we then see the walls change to black, smoke starts filling the room, and her IV bag fills up with blood until it explodes. We then see one by one the Cenobites arrive in the room, and this is where we get our first look at the whole gang. So first we have Chatterer, which is both of our personal favorites, whose skin is melted over his whole head. He barely has any eyes, and he has these metal wires that wrap around his skull with these tiny hooks on the end, and the hooks are used to kind of pull his mouth open, where we see his bloody gums and teeth. And the reason that he is named Chatterer is because sometimes he chatters his teeth while he's walking towards you. It's very creepy.
Very creepy.
Then we have the female Cenobite, and she is called, no shit, I looked this up, Deep Throat.
Oh
That That was her name.
I know where they got that from.
It was so all these cenobites, they don't have names in this movie. All these names actually come from like the behind the scenes production people. This is what they nicknamed, and this slowly became their actual names.
Damn, they gave this woman Deep Throat. That was her nickname on
because of the hole in her throat, whatever. Next is Pinhead, who we also talked about earlier, and he is the leader of this group. Then we have Butterball, who is this obese demon that wears a full leather suit with his belly showing, which has like this huge cut in it being held open by hooks, and he wears very dark round sunglasses.
Kind of looks like Butterbean,
Yeah.
the boxer.
So I actually thought about doing a little like Patreon episode where I explain the backstories of all the Cenobites because they're all very interesting. Butterball had a really interesting one. He's like this very fat pedophile bastard. But yeah, I might do something like that. So Chatterer grabs Christy by sticking his finger in her mouth and holding her there while Pinhead addresses her by saying, "You opened the box and we came." Christy then tries to argue that it's just a box, and Pinhead says, "Oh no, it is a means to summon us." She then asked who the fuck they are, and he responds,
"Explorers in the further regions I experience. Demons to some, angels to others."
And a struggling Christy then tries to tell them that it was a mistake. She didn't know what the box did, but Pinhead's not buying it, and he basically says, "Too fucking bad, that's the deal." And meanwhile, Butterball is over there licking his goddamn lips like Christy's a family-sized bucket of extra crispy from KFC. That was weird. I don't know why they put the shot in there with him licking his lips like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you did
like,
say he was a
I
pedophile.
see what Uncle Frank had and for you. So he tells Christy that she's coming with them so she can enjoy the pleasures of torture. And she starts crying, and Pinhead sees this, and he says one of the most famous lines from the whole movie, "No tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering." Love it. Love that line.
That is good writing.
So right as Pinhead and the gang go to take Christy away, she has a light bulb moment and asks if they know a man named Frank Cotton. And they're like, "Fuck yeah, we do. We tortured the shit out of him." They said, "We literally tortured him so much his face is in 7 pieces." And she's like, "Well, he escaped you guys." And Pinhead's like, "No fucking way. Nobody escapes us. But let's just say he did." What does that have to do with you? And
Chatterer's like, "God damn it, again."
And Christy uses this opportunity to try to make a deal. She says that she can lead them to him, and they can take him back instead of her. Pinhead thinks for a moment about this, and then he says, "If you can get him to admit it, we might take you up on your deal." So after this, we see a conversation between Julia and Frank, where Julia thinks that Christy's going straight to the police. The phone rings while this is going on, and Julia says, "That's probably the police calling right now." And I was like, the police aren't going to call you and ask you if you really killed the guy and fed him to your skinless brother-in-law. They're just going to come to the house. Like, have you ever heard of the police calling somebody? Like, "Are you a killer? Somebody come and told us you killed somebody. Did you? Do we need to come over there?" What the fuck was she thinking?
Yeah, I don't think that happens very often.
I don't think it ever happens.
Yeah, I don't think that happens very often. You think Jeffrey Dahmer got a phone call when that guy escaped? It's like, "Yeah, you've been drilling holes in people's heads and shit. Let's just make a phone call."
I think that history would be a lot different if he would have gotten a pre-murder phone call from the police. That's just my opinion, but it could have went the same.
I think even if they thought she was crazy, they still would have did let's at least do a wellness check.
Yeah. I don't know what Julia's thinking, but Julia's not the sharpest knife in the drawer here. She literally put Frank's gross ass skinless finger in her mouth, so.
And the dirt. that
And
came with it.
the
It may not have had skin, but it had plenty of dirt
still
under
had
the nails.
the dirt survived the torture.
It's like, Frank, I love your dirty, slimy
It's
fingers.
gross. But yeah, Frank doesn't think Christy has gone to the cops yet. He thinks that she is going to try to warn Larry first. And Julia's like, whatever, we just need to go right now. And Frank has to remind her that he has no fucking skin still. You can't really go on the run with no skin.
I don't know what she was thinking.
I feel like not only are you extremely recognizable, but, the bacteria just from other people touching shit and coughing and being, it would fuck you up because you have no skin to protect yourself. I don't think going on the run with no skin is a good idea.
She is so, she's just so head over heels. She's forgotten that he doesn't have skin.
I guess.
It's the suit. It's the suit.
The suit
She's
that
like,
does it.
I forget. The suit's so nice.
But yeah, he's like, hey, I don't got any skin, but my brother will be home soon. So we then see Larry arrive home a little later, and Julia tells him that she has something he needs to see. We then jump back over to the hospital where Christy's boyfriend arrives looking for her, but she's not there, and the nurse has no idea how she escaped. Do you think that when she made this somewhat deal with the Cenobites, they were like, well, okay, we'll transport you out of here so you can show us where Frank is? Because, other than that, there's no possible way she was able to escape this room.
They're like, we'll torture this nurse while you get out.
It's just weird, you caught a ride from the Cenobites.
She's just walking through the hospital, and there's just hooks flying everywhere. Every security guard that tries to stop her just gets ripped into pieces. That's a deleted scene we need.
So we then see Larry walking down the stairs, and when he touches Julia's face, he leaves smears of blood on her cheek. We then skip to a steamy sex scene where Larry is giving it all he's got to Julia, and Julia is loving it. So definitely something a little sketchy going on here.
Yeah, I knew as soon as I seen the sex happen.
The first time I seen this, I was, I don't know, maybe 10 when I finally got through it. And I didn't catch on to it. It was a surprise for me.
I could see that as a 10-year-old.
As a child brain.
I'm like, she's into this way too much.
Yeah.
And I literally put in my notes, I said, damn, they got Larry.
They got him. So after all that, Christy and the box show up to Larry's, and she begins to bang on the door. Julia opens it up, totally pretending that none of this other shit has happened. And a frantic Christy demands to see her dad, and Julia's like, sure, come on in. So Christy finds her dad just chilling, and she immediately starts crying and hugging him. As he attempts to comfort her, we can see that he has some blood on the back of his neck and in his hairline. She then tells him that she needs to tell him something, and he says it's okay. Julia told him everything, and whatever Frank did was unspeakable. But he says it all creepy, so definitely something happening here. He and Julia then tell Christy that they had to kill Frank, but Christy, she says that she needs to see the body. So Julia takes her up to the attic again, and when she walks inside, in the middle of the room is this bloody, skinned corpse just laying on the floor. As Christy looks in horror, Julia exits the room, shutting and locking the door behind her. Before Christy can attempt to get out, Pinhead and the gang show up, and they tell her that they want the man who did this, as he points to the mutilated body on the floor, and it is very obvious that he's pretty pissed about this. Christy then says no because it's her father and he's not part of the deal. Somehow the door unlocks and Christy takes off down the stairs where she's stopped by Julia, but she pushes that bitch out of the way, where Larry then confronts her at the bottom of the steps. He basically says that it's all over now and they can all live basically happily ever after. But Christy's like, no, they gotta leave now. And then Larry fucks up and says, come to daddy. And Christy immediately knows this isn't her father.
My dad would never say that.
No, because it's weird. So Frank killed his brother, and he is now wearing Larry's skin. It doesn't really make sense that he also sounds like Larry, but
he ripped his voice box out.
I can look past it. Also, can you imagine if I tried to put your skin on? It
That'd be a
wouldn't
tight
fit.
fit.
It would. Your skin would come to like my shin or something. It'd be like wearing high water pants.
I could wear your baggy skin.
You
It'd
would
be
have-
like the 90s, a 90s skater kid again.
You just have baggy skin like those, like they're like 600 pounds and they lose like, 400 pounds.
I don't
And
think
they
it would be that bad.
No, but it would just like had the, how you can see them and like they're way slimmer, but their skin is like too stretched out.
I would get some
Some rubber
clips.
some
Have
of
to
the
get
chip
some
clips.
chip clips, yeah. Chip clip all that extra skin up.
Man. So as he's walking over to Christy, she realizes what has happened here, and at first, I can't get the picture you just in baggy skin of mine.
Iris is like, Daddy, you're a little baggy today.
Oh no, it would look like me.
Oh.
Yeah, so at first she's shocked, which, I would be too. My first thought would be, how is this even medically possible? So Christy rips a chunk of Frank's skin off, pretty much confirming her suspicions. She then tries to run, but is grabbed by Julia. Frank then goes to stab Christy, but she breaks free at the last minute, causing him to stab Julia instead. Christy takes off running upstairs, while Frank takes this opportunity to kill on a full stomach as he jams his fingers into Julia's neck and drinks her dry. Christy tries to hide for a bit, but once she thinks she's free and clear, she tries to escape, but he ends up finding her and he pulls her into the attic room. I did see Ashley Lawrence talk about this scene, and she said that this scene was the creepiest thing she had to actually do in the whole movie, because the scene where that dead body falls out and she like sticks her hands in the maggots, so those are all real maggots.
Oh, yeah, that was gross.
Yeah, all actual live real maggots. So this is where she realizes that this body in the middle of the floor is her father's.
You would think this house would stink so bad.
Oh, it would. Totally would. So Frank then begins to basically admit he and Julia killed him, which is about to be Frank's undoing. And as soon as he finishes talking, we start to hear the walls creak and the lights shining in the room, just like we've seen in the beginning. And the cenobites then appear, and Frank's like, fuck. So Pinhead then tells Christy that this isn't for her eyes, so basically leave. And this is where Frank realizes that she set him up. He then goes to stab her, when we then see chains come out of the walls and the ceiling with hooks stabbing into Frank's body as a horrified Christy stands in the doorway crying. We then get this awesome, and I mean awesome, shot of Frank/Larry's skin just being like stretched to the max by all these hooks and chains.
Fucking love the scene.
Oh yeah.
So glad they went back and reshot this.
Uh-huh.
I mean, this is like, for me, Frank in his tiny little shriveled up state, super creepy. This was right up there with it.
This is an amazing special effects shot. It's a 10 out of 10. He then looks at her, he licks his lips, and smiles as he says one of the most famous lines from the movie.
Jesus wept.
So
I fucking love that.
It
that
is,
was
so-
the creepiest part of the movie for me.
this line was originally supposed to be fuck you. And Andrew Robinson, who played Larry, he actually came up with this instead, and Clive Barker loved it. Jumped right on it, was like, do it. And it ended up being probably one of the most famous scenes and one of the most famous lines from this movie.
Yeah, it's great. So
Yeah.
I think the highlight of the movie for me, when he starts licking his lips before he gets ripped apart and says Jesus wept, I was like, damn, that's some good shit.
And it makes sense because of a couple reasons. One, we've seen when Frank lived there, he had a lot of these Jesus statues. So obviously some part of that connects to him. And then also he's smiling. And even though he's been dreading this moment, the Cenobites catching up with him and all this stuff. He's been trying to avoid it, but now that he's in this situation, he's got these hooks stretching his skin apart. He's fucked.
This is the
But he's smiling.
Yeah, this is the
Masochist, yeah.
mastitism. Yeah, I mean, remember he went after this.
He sought this out, yeah.
Yeah, and he's living in that moment of ultimate pleasure and pain.
Yeah.
And he obviously enjoyed that. He just didn't like being dead.
Yeah, after he gets ripped apart. He doesn't like that part of being in like 500 pieces.
And living in hell as a tiny little shriveled up piece of gum.
Yeah, and if you've seen the second one, you actually get to see, after Frank is like tortured and ripped apart, you actually get to see where Frank is. Pretty much where he lives in this hell dimension, which is one of the reasons I say that it's such a good sequel, because it literally, all these places that your imagination was trying to create in the first one, you get to see in the second one. And Frank's kind of eternal torture in this other dimension is kind of perfect for him. And that's one of the reasons I think that Hellbound is such an amazing sequel.
Yeah, the sadomasochism is, I mean, that's what this movie is essentially about. That's the cenobites. That is the ultimate mix of pleasure and pain. So it makes sense that he would have that ultimate euphoria right before the end.
So right after he says this, Christy says, "Fuck this, I'm out." And right as she leaves the room, we see all of the chains react and literally rip Frank into hundreds of pieces. Christy attempts to escape, but she quickly gets cut off by Deep Throat. She ends up running into one of the bedrooms, where she finds Julia laying on the bed, holding the puzzle box with her face ripped off and hooks and chains attached to whatever skin is left. I don't really know how the fuck this happens, because I thought Frank killed her in the hallway, but it is what it is.
They brought her back for some good old sado torture.
Well, it makes sense that maybe he didn't kill her all the way and she grabbed the box and tried to do something with it, because we see in the next movie that she also ends up in this hell dimension with the cenobites. So Christy grabs the box and begins attempting to turn it back to its normal configuration, but as she is doing this, Pinhead appears behind her and says,
"We have such sights to show you."
which is another amazing quotable line.
I love that they didn't end this movie with the cenobites being like, "You upheld your word, so we're going to let you go."
Yeah, they said, "Fuck your deal," and they're going to take you too.
Well, he tells her, he's like, "If you take us to Frank, then we might rip your soul to pieces."
Yeah.
Something along those lines. So he never tells her directly.
Well, he says maybe we'll take your deal.
Yeah, maybe.
So
and maybe not.
It was maybe not. She then gets the box to change, which zaps Pinhead back into his dimension. But this also causes the house to violently shake and self-destruct, I guess. I don't know what's going on there. She then turns around towards the stairs and zaps Deep Throat too, sending her gross ass back. And while this is going on, we see her boyfriend arrive at the house to help. So he breaks down the door and heads inside to look for Christy. And at this point, the ceiling and shit that's all falling everywhere. The house is basically falling apart all around them. Christy runs into Chatterer, who attempts to take the box from her. She then manages to zap his ass back as well. She then turns around where she spots her boyfriend Steve, but we still got one more Cenobite left, and he is standing right behind Steve. Butterball then removes his glasses, where we see that his eyes have been sewn shut, and right as he goes to attack Steve, the fucking ceiling collapses on him, killing him, maybe. I don't know how that worked. I don't know if it killed him or just buried him, or he just went back to his hell dimension. Don't know.
I'm more confused at why he wears sunglasses if his eyes are sewn shut.
I don't know. I mean,
more in a joking way. I don't think
he's
that's an actual plot hole.
He's self-conscious about his eye holes.
It's kind of funny that the one guy who doesn't have to worry about the sun wears sunglasses.
Yeah, I think it's just to hide his sewn up eye holes.
It's a pedo thing.
Yeah, so right as Christy and Steve open the front door to escape the house, the engineer from the hospital scene shows up, knocking Steve's bitch ass out for a minute and causing Christy to drop the box. After Christy and the engineer both fight over the box for a few moments, Christy is able to regain control of it and use it to send the creature back. After leaving the house, they head to this weird field in the city where there's just like a bunch of these fires, and Christy tosses the box into one. But as they stand there watching it burn, that homeless guy who has a taste for crickets shows up and he reaches in there and he pulls the box out of the fire, which causes him to also catch fire. But apparently, this doesn't faze him because he just stands there for a moment and burns while holding this box. And then to Christy's surprise, he morphs into this big ass skeleton dragon thing and he flies away with the box. Interesting thing here is they were getting ready to film the scene, and Clive Barker looks at the special effects guys and he says, "You know what would be awesome? If this guy turned into this giant skeleton dragon." And they were like, "Yeah, but we're already filming." And he made them go and build that really quickly to film this scene. And they're just like dumbfounded. Like, we're at the end of filming. Like, we did all the special effects stuff already. And you want us to build a giant, like, skeleton dragon?
Yeah, that is something that takes time. Imagine wrapping your job. You're like, okay, we're done. And they did a lot in this movie.
Yeah.
So I assume they were very busy, hectic work schedule. You finally wrap. And then the last day at work, they're like, okay, we need you to rush and make the hardest thing that you've done all movie.
And a huge prop at that. Like, it's not small. It's a fucking huge prop to build.
So I love what they do. So they make it very obvious that this homeless guy is not just a homeless guy by him always being around her and this weird shit he does. But obviously he is like the watcher, caretaker of this box.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that they did that at the end.
Yeah, when they built the big skeleton dragon guy, they said what they did was for some reason, they had a skull of some kind of animal from Australia. So they used that, and then they built the rest of him out of basically plastic skeleton parts. So they had to throw this thing together, but that's essentially what it is. But what's cool about it is the head is an actual skull from some kind of animal.
I'll take that over CGI any day.
For sure. So that thing flies off with the box. We then cut back to the same market from the beginning where we hear the old man ask another guy, "What is your pleasure, sir?" as the puzzle box sits on the table. And that is the end of Hellraiser, which was a fantastic ending. Tie it right back to the beginning, and we get to see that this is going to keep going on. This box is going to keep circulating. We find out in Hellbound that there's multiple boxes. There's not just one. So a lot of people apparently looking for this thing so they can get ripped apart in a bunch of pieces and have an orgasm or something. All right.
Best cum you ever had.
I guess. The last cum you ever had. All right. So I got some interesting facts here. So the Chatterer and Butterball Cenobites had dialogue in the original script. However, when they applied their makeup, they could not talk. They couldn't talk in these suits. So their lines were all given to the female Cenobite and Pinhead. They kind of split their lines up. Originally, the Butterball character was the head of the Cenobites, and Pinhead was to not speak at all. So,
well, glad they changed that.
I agree.
He's my least favorite.
Butterball?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's probably everybody's.
It's kind of like if you just took the bones out of a fat person.
It just became skin and just organs and stuff.
And sunglasses. Don't forget the sunglasses.
So this one's kind of funny. For the video release, the film had one of the most unusual pieces of bonus material that has ever been offered. A home shopping network show where merchandise from the movie could be purchased. And this show was hosted by a giddy old lady claiming to be a hardcore fan of the movie. Can you imagine 2 o'clock in the
Like
morning?
Martha Stewart.
2 o'clock in the morning, you're flipping through. Back then, it was all infomercials at nighttime. You're flipping through infomercials, and you got like this 80-year-old woman talking about how much she loves this movie, Hellraiser.
The stadium
Yeah.
mass statistic movie.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah, I bet you that lady didn't even know what like sadomasochistic meant.
Yeah, I don't think she was really a fan of the movie, but
But imagine how much that shit's worth now.
oh
The
yeah,
stuff that was
for
bought.
sure. So here's my last one. The name Pinhead was coined by the makeup crew that applied the prosthetics onto Doug Bradley to distinguish the Cenobites. Clive Barker had no say in choosing Pinhead as a name, and he hated it. He thought that it was undignified, and the character was first referenced to openly, or was, fucking this all up. So the character was first referenced as Pinhead, like in the films, in Hellraiser 3. So he has not been called Pinhead in the first or second one. That was just like a thing that came from the special effects makeup people, and then it transferred to the fans. And then eventually it had gotten so popular, they put it in the movie. So it didn't happen until Hellraiser 3, which is weird thinking that.
Imagine remembering when this came out and going and seeing this and having like nothing to call them.
Yeah, I think
Like
in the,
Pinhead not existing.
yeah,
Like wonder how many people called them like Nailhead,
well,
Nail Face.
he's labeled in the credits as like head Cenobite or something. Yeah, so, and then like Deep Throat is called like female Cenobite.
Oh, they didn't call her Deep Throat.
No, that was it. All of their names all came from the special effects prosthetic people. All right, so ratings and kill count. We have a total of 7 kills. We have Frank Cotton, who was torn apart by chains and hooks. We got Random Man number 1, who was killed with a hammer. Random Man number 2, also a hammer. And Random Man number 3, who was ultimately sucked dry by Frank. It sounds weird. Larry, who was killed by Frank and Julia, then skinned. Julia, who was stabbed and sucked dry by Frank / got her face skin ripped off by the box. And then we have Frank again, who was again torn apart by chains and hooks. Favorite kill, of course, I went with Frank's second death. And I would say my close second was Random Man number 3, because we actually got to see how Frank kills people. And the makeup on him looked good. He looked pretty bad.
So I went with Frank the second time. That whole scene's awesome. I think it's the climax of the movie. But that line he says is what really did it for me.
Yeah, for sure.
The Jesus wept. Number 2, that was kind of hard. I want to go with Larry, although we don't see it. We see the aftermath, his like skin body. But if that wasn't the count because we didn't see it, I would go with Random Man number 1 that gets fucking smashed across the face with that hammer and his fucking jaws like cocked sideways.
That's a good one. The only weak one I would say is Random Man number 2, because it's really fast. They don't really show a lot of it. It's just
Because he was fucking naked.
it's probably first go at it. He was naked. Yeah, interesting thing about Frank's second death is, remember I said in the beginning they actually cut a lot of it out because of the MPAA. Now, when you watch Hellraiser 2, they actually show the full version in that movie, because they do like a recap, and you actually can see what they cut out of the first movie is in the second one. So if you want to see that, pop the second one in.
I wish they would edit the whole version into the first movie. I mean, I wish we had like all the scenes that was cut, like remastered and put into it, and then that whole scene.
Yeah, I agree. That would be cool.
I think, Frank's death is by far the best. The other ones are okay, just because And it was a common thing for horror movies at this time where the MPAAs cut, like, fucking ton of shit out. I feel like they all would have been much better without the cuts,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
wish we had a version of that. Did they ever say why we didn't? Is that footage lost?
So the thing is, I did see the guy who worked on it and helped do editing on it and stuff. He's the same guy who did the digital press kits where he found them in his attic. And he says that there's really hundreds of hours of behind the scenes stuff and different takes and all this stuff. They said what has happened is New World Pictures was a small production company. And he says that a few years after this, they got bought out, and then that whoever bought them out got them bought out. And basically what's happened is all this stuff that they saved from this movie has slowly gotten, it's shifting from person to person, company to company. It's slowly gotten lost. It's been destroyed. He said he didn't even realize that he had all of the press kit stuff in his attic because he has so much shit up there. And he's like, thankfully I had kept it and forgot. But he said the big problem with all that footage is it could be out there somewhere, but they have no idea. And according to him, he said, I don't even know who owns Hellraiser anymore. Like, I don't know who owns all the original stuff anymore. I've lost track of it. It's changed hands so many times.
Damn.
So, film rating. I gave this movie a 5. It has its own unique story. That is like one big thing for me in Hellraiser is it's got a story that you don't see. You don't see this story played out. It's
It is
unique.
definitely an original
Yeah.
story.
It has amazing effects. Love the effects. It has it has like an iconic score. Like when horror people hear that score, they know what that's from. The bad guys, they're 5 out of 5, man. Like the fucking cenobites are some of the coolest looking, awesome bad guys that exist. That's like people's big thing about Hellraiser movies is I feel like everyone's always wanted a Hellraiser movie where you get a lot more cenobite. And we do in the second and especially the third one. But I can't remember really how often we've seen him in the remake. I've only seen that movie once.
Yeah, I do remember watching it. I can't remember how much they're in it. I
Yeah.
know they're in it a lot at the end, but
Yeah, my only complaint with this movie is there are some holes in it here or there, like, Julia dying on the staircase and then being in the bed or Frank all of a sudden having Larry's voice or whatever. But it was $1 million movie and it was done by a first-time director, so I am totally fine with those little bit of issues. That's cool with me, especially how fantastic the rest of the movie is. So this is a 5-star movie for me.
I gave this one a 4.7. It's an absolute classic. The cinematography it's a fucking work of art. Like this movie is a art piece. And it has its own feel because of that. The audio is great. The score, like you said, is iconic. It's one of the, I would say, there's probably 10 scores in 4 of the big franchises that are really recognizable, and this is one of them. But not only that, the reason I put audio is they do a really good job in this movie of having these really intense, unsettling scenes where they didn't play any background audio. And I thought that was, I said it on the show before, that makes things feel more real. Makes you feel like you're
Yeah.
there. Instead of having this like crazy score, like intense building up score playing in the background, do it more like we're there. And this movie did that quite a few times. The gore and the body horror imagery, fucking awesome. They do a really good job at having some really like creepy and unsettling scenes. Obviously, the star of this show is the special effects. Special effects were absolutely fucking incredible. Frank and the Cenobites looked absolutely horrifying. I would definitely say it's a must-see for any horror fans, especially fans of practical effects and effects makeup. Overall, what this movie did for horror, this is one of those movies that we cover. It created this franchise, and we have these big franchises, these big slasher franchises but this movie is a franchise that is so much separated from the others. The story is so unique. It is its own thing. And, obviously the movie created this legacy that will live on forever.
Yeah, I feel like they're always going to do Hellraiser movies. Obviously, Doug Bradley has gotten, past the point where
Old.
he's gotten past the point where he can do Hell Pinhead. The other Cenobites you can typically replace with other, because you don't really see their faces very much. But I feel like they're gonna keep this story is so unique, and these bad guys are so unique that they're gonna keep coming back. We've already seen one remake. It's untelling what we're gonna see in the next 5 years with Hellraiser. Something's probably gonna happen, I would assume. And then, 20 years from now, we could see a whole different take on Hellraiser. I think that it's so unique and so cool, and no one else has really tried to rip off of it, or at least been able to rip off of it, that you're going to keep seeing this pop up. This is going to be, I think, these characters and this story is going to be something that's going to just keep being redone for time and time again.
Yeah, I think it's a shame what happened to some of the later movies that were essentially cop movies
Oh, that's awful.
Cenobites were put in. I think this movie has a awesome potential for a show, like a 10-episode series where they literally go over a Cenobite in their past in each episode.
Yeah,
Each
that'd be cool.
episode's different, and they focus specifically on one of the Cenobites. They can even add different Cenobites in there. I think that would be fucking incredible if it was done right.
Yeah, well, HBO is apparently working on something, so we'll see if anything comes of that. I don't know how great the reboot did because I believe it was only on Hulu. I don't think it did bad, but I don't know if it did good enough to warrant making a sequel to it. I'm not sure.
I don't remember my feelings on it.
I remember feeling pretty 50-50 because the Cenobites are very different. I remember they're all like in white. They're not in black leather and stuff anymore, so
You can't take them out of the black leather.
I feel like that's hard to reinvent them. I don't even think you need to reinvent
It's kind
them.
of part of that like sexual sadomasochism is that BDSM black leather. You can't take them out of that.
Yeah, I feel like you don't really need to change them. They're still scary. They're still relevant. But yeah, I do remember that they looked a lot different. But I don't know, I have to rewatch it and really get my thoughts together on it. But
Yeah, I have a feeling HBO show is going to have characters and a story. They're going to, of course, try to make it a really good story. And I would just love to see a whole series just focused on the Cenobites. If they did that, that would be awesome, but I'm not going to hold my breath for that.
well, that is our take on Hellraiser. Once again, we thank you guys for listening. Please give us a follow or like if you enjoy the show. Check out the website and check out the socials. Tell a friend, a family member, or your favorite Cenobite about the show. And we hope to see you next time.
Jesus wet.